We receive a lot of bottles from craft distilleries all across the country, and most of the time, they're not really to our liking. But this time, the whiskey's actually good, and they have one of the weirdest whiskey bottles that I've ever seen. And if you want to find out what it is, then stick around. We have a very special review today of a very unique looking bottle.
I like it a lot.
You like the bottle a lot.
I did. I think it's really cool.
Okay. We're going to talk about that because it's pretty unique. And their other bottle is also just as unique. So we're going to talk about how that got created and all that stuff and what my thoughts are on it. I've been a little undecided. But what this product is 13th century. Not to be confused.
With 13th Colony.
With 13th Colony. So 13th Century is a distillery that formed in 2013 in Colorado. And so completely different state. Their original distillery name was Private Label Distillery. And so it looked like they were going to be doing things for other brands, and then decided to start their own brand in 2014 with 13th Century. And they fully disclose everything. Now, you won't necessarily get this information from the label. If I had one gripe with their label, it's a clear label with black writing. And
we're old.
You actually have to put white paper underneath it to be able to read it. But it says...
like trying to hold it up to the light. I need...
It says produced and bottled by. Yeah. I think it should just say bottled by. But as we've learned after the 13th Colony issue, the word produced doesn't mean anything. Distilled does mean something. But they are very upfront, and they do not make any of their own whiskey. They are buying new make whiskey, which is a little bit different. We buy whiskey from them in barrels. They're buying new make whiskey, and it's being sent to them in 6,000 gallon tankers, absolutely clear and uncut. And so once they get the whiskey there, they're proofing the whiskey down to their barrel entry proof, which they disclose everything. So the barrel entry proof on this is 123, which the normal barrel entry proof for MVP is 120. Okay. But most distilleries in Kentucky are at 125. So he's at 123. And this is something that's very unique. They only use 30-gallon barrels. Mm-hmm. Do you remember going to Garrison Brothers?
I do.
Those barrels that y'all were dumping and you were helping with bottling, those are all 30-gallon barrels.
Gotcha.
And so what's interesting about a distillery using 30-gallon barrels is that the smaller size increases the surface area contact with the whiskey. And so it's going to extract things from the wood faster than it would in a larger barrel. Mm. But the other thing that's interesting is that a 30-gallon barrel costs almost the same as a 53-gallon, which is the standard size they use in Kentucky. Mm. And so since you're storing roughly 60% of the whiskey in the same cost of vessel, it makes the cost of your whiskey go up tremendously. Okay. And do you know what the normal char levels are for a barrel?
I don't.
Okay. So there's no technical definition for char, but most people call it a char 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Right.
And now some people are calling something like a char 5 where they leave it on for an extra 10 seconds or whatever.
Toasted.
Yeah. Well, toasting is different. Toasting is like a 45-minute process, like in a slow roasting environment, right? Charring it literally looks like the jet engine of a fighter jet, like burning the inside of it. And so he uses chars 2, 3, 4, and 5. And he's buying MGPs for the most part for these whiskeys. He's buying MGP standard offerings. So like the 99% corn and 1% malted barley, he's getting their standard ones and he's aging them separately. But when he makes the blends, he blends the component whiskeys together. And so he's able to tweak by going, okay, this has too much corn in it. Let's put a little bit more of the rye in it. That I like what's going on with this char 2, but let's throw in a char 5 and see what that does. And I find that interesting because for the most part in the U.S., we do our blending in our mash bill, if you will, right? But this is more of a Canadian style blending technique because in Canada, they'll make component whiskeys and then they'll make the blend after it's done aging. And that's what he's doing. Okay, so that is pretty interesting. He also said that all of his barrels come from Barrel Mill. And if you look up that cooperage, they are kind of known for having older trees. So all their trees are 80 plus years old. And that slower growth is likely to produce a slightly smaller cellular size, which is going to cause the whiskey to age differently. And a lot of people believe better than the faster growth oak trees that are available through some of the other, mainstream barrel cooperages. And so since he's got smaller barrels and he has more surface area contact, I asked him, what is your angel shear loss? What do you think it was? So just in Scotland, it's like 2 to 5% per year. In Kentucky, it's like 4 to 7. In Texas, it's 7 to 15. He's in Colorado. What do you think it was?
I mean, my guess would be much lower than it actually is. I just would think, I mean, when I think of Colorado, I think it's super cold. There's not a lot of, I mean, in Texas, the heat just like,
right.
Like rapid, like,
It was, he lost 70% on average in 8 years.
That seems crazy to me.
It's insane. It's like almost Texas levels of evaporative loss. So for a whiskey that's aged 7, 8, 9 years, he's only yielding about 30% of those 30-gallon barrels on average. A little over 30%.
Yeah.
Which is just nuts. Another thing that they do is, do you know the difference between palletize and rickhouse?
I feel like I've seen it.
So remember at Bullet, when we went into their aging warehouse, all of the barrels were on their ends and they were stacked up.
Oh, yeah.
That's palletize.
Okay.
And then rickhouse, they're on their sides and you roll them into holders, right?
Sure.
And so they palletize, which is a more efficient way to store barrels. They're 8 layers high, which they can have more layers in a shorter space because the 30-gallon barrels are smaller. Mm-hmm. But they're 8 gallons high. And once per year, they pull all the barrels out of the aging warehouse and they check for leaks. And because a lot of people don't realize this, when you age whiskey, some of the barrels leak all the whiskey out during the aging process. And when you buy barrels, sometimes you buy a barrel and it's totally empty and you call those phantom barrels, right? But you might have paid $3,000 for this barrel and you open it up, there's nothing in it, right? And so they check for leaks. So in a way, they're kind of rotating barrels because they don't get put back in the same spot, which is also a very expensive process that Maker's Mark uses to create consistency. And I asked him about the aging in the warehouse, and he said between the moving the barrels around once per year and their warehouse is ventilated. So it's an insulated warehouse, but it's not climate controlled. And they have fans that pull in air in the top in, I think he said in the morning, and then pull air out of the bottom in the evening to create ventilation. Well, what that's doing is if there was a higher temperature at the top, those barrels are evaporating and that vapor is heavier than atmospheric air. So it floats down to the bottom and it's getting pulled out in the evening, which might contribute to the angel shear loss, but it's also going to create a really consistent aging environment, whether they're up or down. And he said they have not found any honey hole spots or anything like that so far. So the last thing I want to talk with you about before we actually taste this whiskey is this bottle.
I love it.
Okay, so explain to the people what it is that this bottle is.
Well, what's funny is that when we got it, you were like, what is this supposed to be? And I was like, it's a barrel. And you're like, no, it doesn't have, and I'm like, and you like counted the rings.
The rings.
But like,
yeah, so
it's hollow.
It's hollow in the inside, which is kind of disconcerting because when you take one pour, the volume level goes down tremendously in the bottle, and you feel like you're drinking way faster than you actually are.
But like, I mean, when you turn it on this, you can see all of the, all the rings around the barrel. It's got like a little.
Yeah,
in it.
It does. And I found it interesting. They put the bung hole on the end of the barrel, which is the way it would be done if you paletize. It's on the side if you rick.
Great.
And so they were true to form there. And this bottle is 100% custom, and he owns a patent, and no one else can bottle in this bottle. He also has another bottle that has what looks like a hybrid still on the inside instead of a barrel. And that's what the rye is typically bottled in. We don't have one of those because we just got to sample the rye. But I saw pictures online. So really super unique, custom designed, extremely expensive glass. Meant to be more of a collector's piece than just something that you throw away, right? And that's going to come into play later when we start talking about costs. So let's jump into the specific bottle details of what we're going to be tasting today. So the distillery, as we mentioned, is 13th century. It's formed in 2014. We are going to try the American straight bourbon whiskey that is barrel strength and their rye reserve. It does not say so on the label, but all the barrels that were used in this blend are 6, 7, and 8 years old. The back label does say everything aged for at least 30 months, but that general disclaimer will get you out of trouble, and you are able to put that it's a straight whiskey on your label and use that label for all of your releases, even if you do some younger stuff. But these special releases were slightly higher in age. So do you want to tell them what the proof of these two whiskeys are?
The bourbon is 141.4.
Yes.
It's gonna put hair in your chest.
Yeah.
And the rye is 140.
And both hazmats. So for those of you keeping notes at home, a hazmat whiskey is above 140 proof, and it violates hazmat regulations to put it on an airplane because it's too flammable to be in that environment. Okay, so that's kind of cool. And he said that most, if not all of their releases of these whiskeys will always be hazmat, which I found interesting. With 123 barrel entry proof, you've got 2 proof points away from what the max would have been. And the fact that he's always hitting 140 says something about his aging environment. The SRP for these two bottles, this one is $149.99. This one the rye is $119.99. Now, I asked him, how's your rye cheaper than your bourbon? And he said he released the rye first, and the market received it so well that when he was coming out with the bourbon, he tested higher prices. And so all the rye that's in the market, the price will be going up in future releases. The size of bottle is 750 ml. And what do you say we taste it up?
Let's do it.
I'm going to start with the bourbon. Very sweet on the nose. A lot of brown sugar notes.
I mean, my brain's saying caramel, but it's like dagger.
Yeah, I mean, but I think this one on the nose is in the direction of caramel and not butterscotch or toffee. It's not smoky enough to be toffee for me. Brown sugar and caramel. And I can't quite put my finger on what the fruit note is. Not on the nose. They said it tastes like. I mean, absolutely a full flavored whiskey.
It's so spicy.
It is a little spicy. But I will say that for a 141.4 proof, it is a well-rounded palate. And so it starts off with all of those sweet notes up front. So you're getting all of that brown sugar and caramel. Not really getting a honey note on this one. It's not earthy enough. The mid palate transitions into some fruity floral notes. Maybe a hint of heliotrope in there. But then as it transitions into finish, that's where I'm starting to taste some of the baking spice notes. So I am getting some spearmint, some cinnamon, and a little bit of clove, which would make sense because I believe this has some of their rye whiskey blended in to make that mash bill, right? What else you get?
Like my brain is saying like green apple. Like there's something that tastes like bright, but I don't know if apple is the right.
I don't think you're wrong. I would say green apple would be a good... I have a hard time pulling green apple. I guess I just don't have that neural pathway on, reserve. But I've had a few, especially Russell's Reserve. Some of the Russell's Reserves will come through with a green apple. And I think that's a fair tasting note for this. Green apple for the...
Because it's just got like, I mean, it's like, it's got so much like, it's sweet and it's kind of heavy and it's hot but there's something that's like lighter,
Yeah, crisp.
Yes.
Something crisp about it. I mean, this whiskey is...
It's so yummy.
Full flavored. In fact, I thought that it might be toasted barrel because there are some of those graham cracker, toasted marshmallow, milk chocolate flavors in there. And he said no, that all of the barrels are just charred. And so I didn't look up that cooperage to see whether or not they use propane or if they use like Kelvin, for instance, has live fires to toast their barrels and char their barrels. Sometimes that will add more toasted barrel character, but I don't know. It is a very sweet dessert-like whiskey. So
it's still burning.
Yeah, it's at 141.4. It lets you know.
Oh, like it's in the center of my chest. I'm like, big girl. I can do it.
All right, let's switch to this rye.
Okay. Just a skoshi lighter in proof. It's still gonna.
Yeah, it's still warm, but it's got a traditional rye nose. I'm not getting dill, which is good.
Yeah.
It's more in the direction of that pine.
Maybe a little spearminty.
Yeah, some spearmint for sure on the nose. Let's see what it tastes like. Just a big, bold rye.
Wow.
It kind of reminds me of the Jack Daniel's barrel proof rye.
It's got some like green flavors. Like my brain is thinking like grassy, but I don't think that's the right. Like there's something that's like.
No, it's not grassy, but I know what you're saying.
I mean it doesn't taste like grass, but
it's more in the direction like maybe like pepper, like a bell pepper, a green bell pepper.
I can't put my finger on it.
But it's also got all those layers of sweet with the brown sugar. This one is the sweetness tastes more like honey to me than caramel. And normally honey just like has a hint of like a earthiness to it for me. But this is also lovely. Very complex. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't have any nutty characteristic to it. But with all of those baking spice notes, clove really sticks out in this. Mm-hmm. If you've ever like opened up a package of clove that you had around because you were baking or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of clove in this. Mm-hmm. Mixed with like a green vegetal note, mixed with pine and spearmint.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that bubblegum note that I get on a lot of MGP ryes.
I've just never been with you on the bubblegum thing.
Listen,
you're alone in that.
I know, I'm not alone.
Well,
I have
in
been
this room,
totally
you were
vindicated in a room full of people.
Okay.
Do you know that story? We were tasting MVP rye, and I said bubblegum, and there were like 17 people in the room, and they were all like, nah, you're crazy. And then some guy walked in and was like, what are y'all doing? And we're like, oh, we're tasting whiskey. And he wasn't there for the previous part. I poured us some whiskey. He takes one sip. Everyone's standing there staring at him. And he goes, tastes like bubblegum. And I was like, in your faces. But taste is very subjective. So how would you rate this whiskey on a 100-point scale? I feel the same about both of them in terms of like their quality of drinking experience.
Yeah.
I think this is an excellent bourbon. I think this is an excellent rye. So how would you rate these?
I like mid-90s for sure. Like I like them a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe like I am a little partial to really hot whiskey because I'm just like, oh, the burn means it's working.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot. And that maybe that influenced it, but it's got really good flavor.
Say a number.
I don't know, 93, 94.
Yeah, I'm right in there. This is in my opinion, this is world-class whiskey.
I like it a lot.
Now at $149.99 and $119.99, are you a buy or a pass?
I think I'd still buy it. I the bottle's beautiful. The flavor is great. I like high proof whiskeys. I just like them.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because, when you're looking at a whiskey like this, you cannot compare it to legacy distilleries. You can't compare this to a Heaven Hill product or even a Buffalo Trace or Wild Turkey or whatever because their economies of scale are completely different. A lot of their inputs are way more expensive per unit than what the big legacy distilleries pay for. Because he has to have custom glass, which means he has to do a custom distillation run or a custom glass run. And what happens when you order from overseas and you change your order from 1,000 units to 10,000 units, right? I mean,
I know it's terrible.
Right. So what
Takes forever.
But your price per unit.
Oh right. I mean the
So something that
price
you
goes
pay
down, but
$35 for, if you have them make 5 times as much, they'll lower the price to $17 per unit.
sure.
But now you have to have, this much more money and storage space and all this stuff.
All the things.
So to have a custom glass like this, it's expensive. The production costs are higher. He has an aging environment that causes him to lose more whiskey than they do in other areas. He has smaller barrels that cost the same amount of money, so he has to have more barrels to produce the same amount of whiskey. So when you add it all up, yes, it is expensive, but if you're looking for this type of drinking experience, I would actually recommend this as a buy. Now, if you are working on a really limited budget, stick with the legacy distilleries. You're not going to be unhappy with what you get. But this would be a bottle that you could get out and share with somebody who's a whiskey enthusiast that probably haven't seen it before, and they're going to be impressed with this flavor. I mean, this whiskey is on par with some of the top whiskeys that I had from last year in terms of quality drinking experience. So for $149, I think I'm a buy.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, so let's give away some whiskey.
Let's do it, but not all of it because I want to drink it. I want to drink all of.
We're going to be generous, but we're.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's only this much rye.
Well, yeah. So with that in mind,
we're going to give all of that away.
No, we're not. We're gonna. There's not even 1 ounce left, so we're not going to give any rye away.
Okay, just kidding.
But we are going to give away 5 1-ounce samples.
Oh wow,
that's
awesome.
of the bourbon because we got a whole bottle.
I can't wait for everyone to try it.
Yeah,
I think 5 samples is a great idea.
It's a great idea. That way 5 of you get to experience it. Yeah. And so the way that you can enter this free giveaway is to like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, which you're going to want to do because ringing the bell notifies you of future content. And not only is our content something that you should probably want to watch if you love whiskey, but also we do a free giveaway each time. So you don't want to miss that. And most importantly, you have to fill out the web form in the video description below. That gives us your basic contact information. We will run a randomizer. We'll post it publicly, reach out to you, get your shipping details, and get you your sample sent out to you absolutely for free. Tell the people how they can support the channel, Pretty Girl.
Well, we do have a Patreon, however you want to say it. We have one of those.
It's Patreon, but you guys are patrons.
Patrons. We always get it wrong. So we have one of those with lots of tiers that, are for every budget, right? For every budget. And we made sure that we added lots of really great member benefits, distillery takeovers, in-person meetups, discounts on merch, like behind the scenes stuff. Like we're trying to make it worth your
You feel like
support.
you're getting your money's worth. It's not just a donation.
Yeah.
But for those of you who don't want to make a monthly commitment, you can support the channel through buying merchandise from us.
Yes.
So we have all whiskey stuff that Lindsay has had custom made.
That's true.
For the channel. And it's whiskey stuff made by whiskey people for whiskey people. So if you go to bourbonrealtalk.com, you're going to see some stuff that you can't live without. Yeah. And you can also show some love to the channel by hiring me as your real estate agent. I operate in the Dallas and Houston metro areas. My real estate business has always subsidized this channel. And so if you need service in either of those metroplex areas, you can reach out to me through the link in the video description below. And I'd love to interview for the job. And if you happen to hire me and we complete a transaction, you get an epic bottle as a closing gift.
With an epic transaction coordinator.
Yeah, because Lindsay does that.
She always forgets that.
Yeah.
I do so many things.
So many things for this family.
So many things.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
All the things.
Well, if this is your first time tuning in, we'd like to thank you for the view and let you know a little bit about why we do what we do. We're all about bringing people together around spirits. And that is sadly because we lost my brother to suicide in 2014. And trying to figure out, how you make a difference after you experience a loss like that can be difficult. And we didn't really find anything that met up with both of our personalities. And eventually I started to notice that the kinds of connections that my brother was missing in his life when he made that decision were the types of connections that I was seeing being formed in the whiskey enthusiast community, even among people who would normally not make connections with each other because the whiskey brings people together. So we thought maybe if we could get you connected to whiskey, the whiskey did the rest of the job and connect you to others. And we ended up starting a forum to help facilitate those connections called Bourbon Real Talk Community. It's a free Facebook-based forum that you can go join. There's no troll behavior in there. Lots of great things happening. In-person meetups, people, helping find samples of stuff that others can't find. Lots of education and a whole lot of support for mental health and just living life together. And we knew we needed to start that because when we looked at opportunities for connection out there, we saw a lot of, hateful people being hateful to strangers online. And so we started our own forum, but those hateful people taught us another valuable lesson. And that is, if they can hate, we can love. And we end every episode with the same sign off because of that lesson. And it's this: if you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that we love you. We'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk. Cheers.